Yo, what's going on, E7 fam? Pat here, back from an exhausting week to do another account review video. This one is for the Indomitable season where we finished Emperor. You all seem to really like this style of content, so I'll keep making them all for you as long as you keep actually enjoying it. This video will obviously include my gear on my characters, as well as my thought processes on how I built those characters and my overall thoughts on the meta. I'll show you really quickly the frame in case you're wondering. I decided to put it on just for this video, but I promise you right now I will change it back because I think that this frame is actually terrible. So you can see rewarded to those who finished the season in Emperor League and the World Arena Indomitable season. Again, it's pretty hideous. I think this might be one of the worst, if not the worst RTA frame they've ever had. I'm just going to go back to this one. The red frame is the one that I really like. So this season, we secured Emperor in around 620 to 630 games or so, pretty much identical to what we did in the Triumph season last time. And even though it's an identical performance, the meta is drastically different, I feel like, this time than it was in the past. If you recall last season, we ended up with a meta where Bruisers felt pretty good and Icarina was my season MVP and Control was pretty dominant. This meta that we're currently in feels like we've flipped the script and we've gone back in time to an era where Peyra and Conqueror Lilius were the dominant characters, with a couple of other returning players and new players alike with characters like Command Model Leica as well as Ahmed. Those are the characters I felt like were showing up very early and very often, and there were still some good bruiser drafts. One specific night that we'll talk about in particular later on in the video was also incredibly common throughout this format. But this is definitely an aggressive players format, it feels like. I made the statement in the World's End podcast that I felt that turn 2 is fine, and I got roasted for it. I think that turn 2 is absolutely still in a fine spot. The problem is that aggressive and cleave strategies are absolutely a whole leg up above those. As I started to play more games towards the end of the season, it became very apparent that characters like Architect Leica, with her changes, kind of box or strangle out certain players that don't have very good gear or do not have a huge roster. And I think that that is probably a problem. I'm not a super big fan of the fact that, again, turn 2 just kind of gets stuffed by a lot of things that were changed or added to the game within the last month or two. So I can see why people were saying that that my take that turn 2 was fine is wrong. You can absolutely still play turn 2. It is viable. You can still get something like Legend with it if you want to. It's definitely a lot harder though than just playing the game aggressively. And I think that the developers of the game, Smilegate and Super Creative, really need to do a better job at giving more tools to slower and newer players. You need to start addressing specific things, not with collab units and not with Moonlight 5-stars, but with your standard RGB 5-star characters. Yeah, that probably makes less money overall, but I think at this point, it's kind of warranted, because one thing I've noticed is a lot of people always worried that they're just not going to be able to get the new units or they're not going to be able to gear them. And I hear it from my audience from time to time, and it makes me worry about new player or intermediate player retention in this game. This season, the Indomitable season, was one of the hardest seasons for me, and it's not because of the actual gameplay, but because my guild, Vast Ocean, which I founded with my real-life friends, started to see some cracks and people leaving, and it's largely due to there's just not being certain things there needed to retain them as players. They just either got tired of waiting for something that never showed up. They just generally got bored and wanted to move on and do something else. And then we had several other people leave for real life commitments, such as graduate school, a new career change, getting engaged, things like that. So that's why I saw a lot of my real life friends kind of exit the Epic 7 space. And that was kind of hard on me mentally, because I bounced my ideas for not just Epic 7, but a lot of things off of my friends. They're really important to me. And so to not have that avenue outside of a couple people like my friends Crest and Aki Lucky, there's not really too many people I can bounce ideas off of. And again, that makes for a challenging climb experience because I primarily am a theory crafter from my card game days, and I don't really have the time most of the time to actually put those theory crafts into practice. I kind of am winging it a lot, and I'm relying on feedback that I get from other people, crowdsourcing my ideas out there and seeing what I get back. So when that pool of people has kind of shrunk to test my ideas, it relies squarely on me. And again, I don't have as many games played as some other people, so that it's been a little bit rough. Thankfully, the Orbis Caster Clash has made me 5 really good friends now. And through them, I have been able to kind of expand my network a bit and actually get to talk to some more people within the community. And they've all had pretty positive things to say, very nice things to say to me. And it kind of like helps reaffirm some ideas I might have, or, give me some ideas on where I should actually go, which I think is pretty good to have. I feel like networking is a huge skill, not just in a game like Epic 7, but in life. Just having connections, having friends, people you can rely on when the going gets tough is really, really important. So for the first 75% of this season, things kind of felt pretty dark when I was just testing stuff. But those bonds that I started to develop really started to help me mentally when I kind of needed it, and helped me kind of shore up a couple things towards the end of the season. All right, so enough of me blabbing. Let's get into the actual units now. Edward Elric is first. If you recall, last season I said he was a top 5 unit, and that is because control is traditionally the correct strategy to be playing against very slow, bulky strategies. I just spent great detail talking about how aggressive the format actually is. So as you can expect, Edward Elric, while still an important counterpick character, is not as relevant as he was in the last format, because control has kind of taken a slide for the most part. He is exactly the same as he was built in the Triumph season. Red Robbie. I only played about 4 or 5 games throughout the season, but she had a 100% win rate. She is incredibly powerful into drafts that don't have any overwhelming advantages against her. For example, they might have 2 green DPS or a green and a neutral pick DPS. She really excels in those games, especially if they're bruiser versus bruiser games, like your opponent has like Senya and something else. Ravi is a pretty decent pick there because of things like her actual sustain with something like Sigurd's Scythe, the huge amount of effectiveness that she gets from Demon's Blood, which allows you to kind of wreck the ER Senyas if you ever go super late into Battle Frenzy. And then Devil Drive just being one of the most absurd S3s in the entire game. AoE defense penetration move with a stun and 100% CR pushback is just absolutely backbreaking, especially with how spammable this thing is in the later parts of the game. Honestly, the only reason I think this character is not more played is because she is an attack scaling unit and she's super easy to blow up. This is pretty tanky, I feel like, for a Red Ravi. If you try to go too much tankier than this, I feel like you just won't actually have meaningful damage to contribute to a game. It's a very delicate balance, I feel like, with this character. Overall, my stance on bruisers in general in this format is to have them be as tanky as possible, even if it means losing out on damage, because having some damage is better than no damage, because the aggressive players, even if they're on a standard style, if they have 4 characters that are going before your first character gets a turn, they can focus fire a specific character. And in the case of a character like Robbie or even like Ilanav, if they just kill that character before they do anything, it feels particularly bad, and you didn't really get anything out of that character. Charlotte, exactly the same as the Triumph season. Still play her in exactly the same scenarios that we had before, which is essentially when my opponent has only green DPS and Spectre, or Landy and another green DPS, because it gives me reach for those characters that are otherwise hard to get to. She feels a lot more boom bust than a character like Ravi, for example. She feels very 50-50. I'm not super keen on drafting her, but there are a couple spots where I picked her where she won me a couple of games. But again, there are a couple that I picked her in that she did not win me those actual games. Still really like her on Senya's artifact because it gives me that extra splash damage on her S1 dual swords. Ilanav, aka Wintenberg waifu, probably my favorite character to play the entire season. Not exactly my most successful character, but when you high roll with this character, you feel amazing, you feel unstoppable, you feel like there's nothing in the whole world that can hold you back from winning that game. So That's why I really like her. She just gives these really like amazingly powerful feelings to you when she's actually really, really good. This is a very feast or famine unit. Repel is definitely improved, but not massively so. And Rush feels absolutely miserable. The moneymaker is on Punish, which they up the damage on this and they absolutely overtuned the hell out of the soul burn damage, right? But they still nerfed it by getting rid of the survivability, which is why you see that my Illinav is absurdly tanky and slow because people just focus fire this character. There were a lot of games where my opponents just desperately tried to kill my Illinav and just couldn't because she was like a brick. And even though I wasn't hitting very hard, I was taking games to like Frenzy 5 and slowly but surely dismantling my opponent's team and then picking up the dub there. Elbrus Ritual Sword is my preferred choice over Mature Sunglasses. Yes, Mature Sunglasses gives you even more survivability, but this is a high roll character, baby. You want to go big or go home with her for sure. If you're not spamming Punish, it feels like every single time she attacks, then you're in for a bad time. This character has given me a lot of success this season, and I wouldn't say it's like an amazing win rate. Like it's not like 80 or 90% of the time I pick Elinav I win. It's more like 60 to 70% of the time I win with her 2/3 of the time. And again, my favorite character to play this season. She feels great, but you definitely can't pick her everywhere. I think the 3 to 4 slot is really where you want to go, or the 4 to 5 slot, depending on which whether you had first or second pick. There are some times where if you take her third in a draft to counter Apocalypse Robbie, you will be met with characters like Ikarina or Shu. And if you can't find a way to answer those threats, or if they get banned out, you're not going to have a good time with this character. You really want to pick her into slow, like health scaling drafts that don't have a realistic way to deal with her. Lilius. So, Lilius was reworked this season to be a silver bullet. A silver bullet in card game terms, if you do not know, is essentially akin to the bullet that kills the werewolf or the monster in a given story. It is a one bullet answer to something, and generally when you design a silver bullet, something that's specifically meant to answer one thing and one thing only, there are two ways that it goes. Number one, it's way too narrow and it does almost nothing and falls somewhat flat. And number two is it's generically too good. Like it has too many use cases that you didn't account for and is probably stupid broken. To give you an example of the second one, characters like Politis to counter Cleave or Rowana to counter SSB, they're too broad and have kind of spilled over and caused issues in other aspects of the actual game, and have basically given us unintended consequences, I feel like, with those characters. Lilius is more towards the former than the latter. The More artifact doesn't really do anything to address the fact that Lua is the most overpowered character in the game and desperately needs a nerf or a rework entirely. That said, Lilius is still a really fun character to use. You just can't use her really early on in the draft. She's better in the 3 to 5 slot. If you try to take her first pick against Conqueror Lilius, good players will just play around you, and you probably will not win that game. If you're wondering why I'm on Arias, one of the things that I learned with this character late in the season is that it's difficult to take a tank in the 1-2 spot without your opponent just going crazy aggressive on you or picking Faithless Litica in an otherwise standard draft. So it became vitally important to have Arias on a multitude of characters so that way I could take Arias anywhere from the first slot to the 5th pick slot and still have some form of actual damage mitigation on my characters. I think Lilius is kind of like a mini version of Mediator Coeric. She's a Swiss Army knife style character. She's not the best at anything, but she is passable in a lot of different scenarios. So, for example, the S3 does decent AoE damage with my build. Not amazing, but enough to do some chip 4 to 5k. It still is a cleanse. We have the ability to disrupt non-attack skill users, and I have some effectiveness so that way I can get those mid-bulk aggressive Soul Weavers potentially, but not anything crazy like, for example, a Destina. And then Follow Me Charge not only gives us some DPS to our team, But the soul burn that grants an extra turn can actually steal games. There were a lot of scenarios when I was playing Lilius where I would defense break in Apocalypse Robbie with somebody like Karina, and I'd be flush with souls, and I could just soul burn this thing, because now that it has almost a guaranteed chance to crit, I could just soul burn this thing and just mow down an Apocalypse Robbie with almost anything. Like, I've done it with like 60 souls and just go soul burn into a defense broken Apocalypse Robbie and kill it with just like Hand Guy is the only other person that's still available on my team, because my defense breaker ended up dying at some point before Lilius got to her turn. Overall, I think Lilius feels like a high tier 3 character. I think she's missing something to make her exceptional, but I think that this character is definitely worth having built. Kayron. Exactly the same as the Triumph Season video. I still think he's necessary for anti-cleave, but I did not have a high success rate with him most of the time, and that's why I didn't really pick him, because most cleave players are playing Flan and Ahmed, and he is absolutely terrible against blue units. Mercedes, her gear is slightly different. It's actually worse than the last time you probably have all seen her, and that's because I'm not super high on Mercedes as a character. I picked her maybe once or twice this season, and it was all right. I wasn't really exceptional. I just needed an AoE DPS, and she just happened to be the one that I decided on in that moment when the timer was running low. I think she's worth having built, but not a really high priority. She feels kind of low on the tier list. I would say like a 4th or 5th tier pick character most of the time. There's just too many aggressive strategies that destroy her before she actually gets set up. She's good and definitely usable, but not exactly the first choice in a lot of scenarios. Milim feels massively improved this season. I already talked about her in my revisit to the Tensura collab characters earlier in the month. Upgraded Dragon Knuckles, along with the tanky Milim that I talked about in the Triumph season, were definitely super good, and I liked playing that build on Lifesteal. But with the advent of the new exclusive equipment, which was not yet out when I made the Tensura collab video, made me think that counter might be a possible build for her. After playing my old Lifesteal build with the Lifesteal exclusive equipment, I realized I had a ton of healing, and it was difficult as all hell to kill Milim, but I couldn't help shake the fact that the counter proc from upgraded Dragon Knuckles was what was winning me games and allowing me to play Milim in a lot more general scenarios. She wasn't just a Landy pick anymore on this build. She was a general use bruiser when I needed a red character that had big burst potential, and I also needed some kind of reach on her. So overall, I made that switch to counter, and even though my stats are worse because I didn't have as good a counter gear as I did Lifesteal gear laying around to use on her, this new exclusive equipment on counter with the plus 30 Knuckles feels exceptional, and I could feel good about picking her in the 3 slot, and you know, that deters a potential Landy, and also the character just has, in general, it feels like good enough damage to carry a game for once. Like with this build, I feel like this Milim can carry a game. I have killed Apocalypse Robbies with this character if the game has gone on long enough. So again, I'm not worried. Like when I was playing the Glass Cannon Speed Milim, I was just worried that I wasn't going to get any impact out of her and she was going to die all the time. This character, once I get past my very first turn and get up Dragon Fear, I don't really have any, issues with her. I feel like it's very hard to actually kill her, assuming they don't have something that's kind of an anti-dodge unit tech. So yeah, Milim feels fantastic in this format. Politis, here's my damage Politis that I played for this season. I think I played her maybe 1 or 2 games. This is not really the Politis that I want to talk about. It's this one. This is the one that we talked about in the 5 Rings video, if you watched that one. This Politis feels very, very good into Ahmed. And Ahmed was pretty much everywhere for a good chunk of my climb this season. And I started to notice in the last 48 to 72 hours that all of the Ahmed abusers were just banning Belly and Politis because they recognized that was what was beating them. And they were just turning that off. And your only real outs at that point to beating them were go faster, which is something we always talk about on this channel. That's not realistic for a lot of people who play Epic 7. And then your other out is playing Zeo on effectiveness, which is why a lot of people in the last couple of days were on effectiveness Zeo, because you needed to pivot to that build to have the option to beat that Ahmed draft. So yeah, This Politis, if they're going to take Ahmed and they don't actually ban or pre-ban Politis, is very effective against them. And if they don't respect it, they probably will lose, because when they press their skills, there is a high chance that one or more of their characters are going to be getting stunned. I have a decent amount of effectiveness so that I can actually still tag even the Ahmed, and that could potentially lose you the game. And then with the amount of CR you get from the S2 Astral Guide, you're probably going to end up winning that game. I feel like most games that I had Politis into Ahmed, I won those games. It's very difficult for them to actually win it. So if you're serious about climbing, as long as Ahmed is a relevant character, Politis built in this style is something that I think you're going to absolutely have to have. Researcher Carrot is our one of our last red units here. She is essentially an answer to Landy. That's kind of all I really use her for. There are certain drafts where your opponent is locked into a Landy draft and you have like Carrot Mealum, and there's nothing they can really do about it, because they can't give you Mealum, because if they give you Mealum, then you're going to just kill them through stun. So the only other option is you're going to have to AoE cleave me through a bunch of burns triggered by Researcher Carrot's S2. You don't need as good a gear as what I have. You could play, honestly, like garbage. She just needs to exist to give burns out via her shield, and then when you get to her turn, you just soul burn for the W. That's pretty much all she's there for. I only play her into Landy and like almost no other scenarios. Roy Mustang. So, something I had theory crafted with the chatty buff was that Lifesteal Pen Roy Mustang might be a real thing, but I never really put that into practice. Roy Mustang is my favorite character from Full Metal Alchemist, and I plus 15'd him immediately after I pulled him, but I wasn't an aggressive player, and seeing how Kana and Elvmage were playing him, that really wasn't my jam, and I was pretty down on him. After those chatty changes, eventually this season, I did run into a couple people who were playing the Lifesteal Chatty Roy Mustang. And there are certain drafts where like your opponent has Crimson Armin and like Maid Chloe and maybe like something else like Ikarina, right? And Roy Mustang. Like if that is your draft, it is incredibly difficult to, one, kill Roy, and two, not incur the wrath of whatever the other DPS is, in this case, Ikarina. So it's just difficult to play in that scenario. And there were certain times I'd play against Roy Mustang and realize, because of Chatty's barrier, because of, you know, the tank mitigation and the damage share and the healing from the Soul Weaver, there is nothing I can do to kill Roy Mustang. It is actually impossible, because my team is a mid-speed team. I cannot sequence enough hits in a row to actually one-shot this character, and his life is so low that once all my characters have gone, their Soul Weaver just tops him back off. Chatty is refreshed. Lifesteal puts him back at full. And you're like, I can't kill this man. I literally can't kill him. And he just wins the game for free. There are certain drafts that if your opponent doesn't recognize that it is a trap draft with Roy Mustang, he is unkillable and therefore will just get his S3. And you've already seen his S3, I assume. It just wins the game. So after playing against that several times, and me really wanting to experiment with different knights, because throughout this video you'll notice there's going to be a lot of RES holders, I realized that he was actually a pretty good pick. And he won me pretty much every single game that he made it through where he was not actually banned. I think he is a very good character, and I think that this strategy for turn 2 players in particular is something that more of them should actually employ, because again, in the standard versus standard matchup, your opponent might not recognize that this is a play pattern or a trap, and you can just very easily win that game. So, as you could probably guess from the thumbnail, this is our MVP of the season, Shuna. Just take a sip of water. So, I'm not saying I called it, but I absolutely called it. I knew that there was something here for this character, and I was right. She is incredibly good in the 3 to 4 pick spot because of her S3 here, Sleeping Spell. Yes, I did not actually finish mulling this character because I am strapped for materials, and this is not exactly the best build on her. I wish I had about another 200 defense with these same stats, but what can you do? This is the best that I could do with what I had. So, for the last couple of weeks, I'd been saying I think Shuna is quite a good character. She is very, very good at helping you stabilize in situations where you need a healer and a cleanser. She's not the best, but she could fill that role. But Sleeping Spell is so powerful. It gives you so much of a tempo advantage with the actual changes. And the exclusive equipment we're playing here is actually the one that gives you the 100% chance to sleep. And then we have Unfading Memories here for the effect resistance. I'll continue to iterate on this character. There is definitely a better version of her than what I'm playing. But for the last couple of weeks, like I said, I was saying I think this character is amazing. I said it to Mashu at Smilegate. I think that Shuna is actually incredibly good with her changes. And he didn't really see it. He just thought, well, Shuna is just good, but not like meta, right? And then the last 72 hours kind of hit. And I had already been playing Shuna in the 3-4 slot and just undoing all of my opponent's setup and just getting all of this tempo. I started to queue into a lot of the Veritas guys, and then eventually a lot of the people from a guild like Fleet. And those people were all doing the same strategy that I was doing, which is you take Hand Guy and like Aravi 1-2, right? And then you take your counterpick DPS and Shuna, and it's like all of the tempo is kind of gone, because if you have characters slower than the Shuna and I sleep spell you, it's kind of like, all right, whatever went first, whatever openers and setup you had, they're losing their next turn, and they have a longer way to go, and then you're skipping the important DPS's first turn. So, like, no Shu, no Sanya potentially, depending if it's on, like, an ER build or not, no Alencia, no Illinev, no Apocalypse Ravi. If your Spectre is slower than mine, you miss your Spectre's first turn. It pretty much just gives you all of the tempo. You take Shuna because you need a second cleanser in addition to Mediator or your Destina, and you're doing it because a well-placed sleeping spell gives you so much momentum in the game. The sleep spell is very, very important, and people just don't see it coming. Even if my opponent has Mediator, I'll take Shuna into it because you can never press your buttons. Like, you just can't. If you go Mediator and I have like APOC, TJB to start a game, and then in the 3-4 slot I take counter pick to your DPS, and then I take Shuna as my 4th pick slot, your Mediator is actually worthless at that point besides his S1. If you press S2, I will punish you with Desert Jewel Bazaar. If you press S3, I will punish you with Shuna. She completely steals all of the momentum, all of the tempo from the opponent's side of the board in a standard game. Pretty much, if Shuna's on the board, you have to get rid of her as fast as possible. If they have mitigation in tandem with Shuna, the game becomes very, very difficult to win because of the barriers, because of the healing, and the fact that every couple of turn cycles, you are just losing a whole turn cycle. Every time the Shuna presses sleep spell, you lose 4 turns if you think about it. So over the course of a long enough game, 2 sleep spells is you lost 8 turns. 3 sleep spells is you lost 12 turns, and so on and so forth. And for this to be on a support and not like a squishy control mage is really, really rough. I think the only drawback on this character right now is that Magicule Explosion has absolutely garbage healing. So if you do not like Unfading Memories, which is how I have her built, I encourage you to try Celestine. The variant of Shuna that I most commonly ran into, though, is the one that is most akin to Desert Jewel Bazaar, which is on the artifact Eternus and is played about 25 speed faster than what I am playing, but has about 3,000 less HP than how I am actually playing the character. It is personal preference how you play her, but Shuna is, like I said, in my opinion, the MVP of this season. There are 2 others that could also fight for that title, and we'll talk about them when we get to them. But for right now, I think that Shuna is that good. I think everyone should have access to some form of Shuna because of her ability to stabilize a game as well as kind of slow down the pace of your opponent's strategy. I'm just really proud of myself because I don't always call it right. I don't always get it right on my impressions, but I knew, I was so certain for the last like 4 weeks or so that Shuna really was that good. And I felt like I was taking crazy pills because no one believed me, and I was the only one having success with her on ladder. And then in the last day, to see all of these legend players just spamming Shuna, that's when I knew I was on to some hot tech. And it was basically being kept under wraps until the last time. So yeah, I called it. I did it, Mom. I feel really proud of myself. Yeah, love this character. Shu. I think she's slightly different than the last time you have all seen her. She has a lot more health than you probably remember, and she's not on pen set, so less damage overall. As you'll notice, I have an amazing 0% effect resistance, which is pivotal in resisting 5 para stuns to win a tournament. So, yeah. Really basic Shu, honestly, in my opinion, aside from the fact that my HP is absolutely massive on this character. Same thing we talked about, same principle before, right? Some damage is better than no damage, so we just want a Shu that can't get stunned off the rip, which is why I'm on immunity, and just sit on the board as long as possible, and if we high roll, we win the game. That's pretty much the logic for why Shu's built this way. Next up is Ikarina, which was last season's MVP. If you recall, we talked about the fact that this season is much more aggressive than the previous season. You would think that this character would be a lot more played because Rocket Punch is designed to answer aggressive strategies. The thing is, last season, you could catch everyone by surprise with Ikarina, and they didn't really respect the character or know how good she actually was. You could not watch a stream for the last several months in high-level RTA without seeing Karina. That means every aggressive player at the top of the ladder knows what Karina is, know how she's probably built, and knows how to actually answer the character. And they have, some kind of tech that they are ready and willing to use against Ikarina. Mostly Architect Leica, which is going to end up being a force ban if you are basically the person that is getting aggressed upon. Still important. Still one of the best characters in the game. Still one of my most played characters of the season. But she's not the MVP because, again, everyone is well aware of what she does and how to actually answer her now. Kisei is next. You'll notice that my Kisei is basically just not as fast as some other Kiseis and is just trying to have as much damage as possible. This is for 2 reasons. If I have Ahmed, people will usually hunker down and not try to actually race it, which means you could take Kisei in the 4-5 slot because of the very powerful S2, S3 combo from Ahmed, allowing you to press S3 into S2 on Kisei immediately. And for that, I just want to have as much damage as I can possibly actually get. On top of that, there are so many aggressive characters in this format that the 260 to 275 range that most Kiseis are played in is not really it for speed contesting. There are so many 280, 290, 300, 310 characters right now that trying to actually race with a Kisei that's faster than this feels kind of pointless. Like 260 is enough. It's enough to cut in front of Hand Guy if you need her to reset Hand Guy. And I think going any faster than that is kind of not worth it because you're going to get got by like even a generic, basic Faithless Litica from most people that are in Champion and like low Emperor. So yeah, I just didn't see the reason to go faster than this. I've always loved this character, always loved this character's design, love this character's Japanese voice actress to death. Yeah, character is just good. I think everyone who wants to have the ability to pivot to an aggressive strategy should have access to a Kisei, especially with how important Ahmed is in the format. Wolf Luna, yeah, you guys probably know what it is. I always want a 300 plus speed contester. I don't really try to play anybody faster than 300 speed on the nose because if we're going to get into a match where you seriously want turn 1, you're going to race me for turn 1, I'm not going to really try to fight you for it. I'm just going to try to be tricky and outdraft you somewhere else, or I'm going to just tank down and try to survive it. Still, having a 300 speed para is important because there are some times where you can jam her in the 3-4 slot, especially if you already have Desert Jewel Basar, which will allow you to shut down specific scenarios like Last Rider Crow, for example. If they have Last Rider Crow and no real cleanser, or if you're just going to hard commit to banning like Mediator Coeric or something, you can really shut down specific drafts with Para. So I think having her is really, really important. I wish mine was better. Like, I wish it was faster. I wish I had more HP. I wish it had more effectiveness, but I don't really have that amazing gear for these kinds of characters. I just don't roll it. I just don't get lucky. I don't hit effectiveness rings that have high speed. I don't hit a lot of like 20 plus speed pieces, especially if they're red pieces. You'll notice there's a lot of purples here. I don't roll high speed pieces on red. I've been trying for years at this point, and we just don't get it. So this is the best I can do with my current box. Hopefully one day I can make an even better Wolf Luna, because I think that having her in this format is somewhat important, because again, she does allow you to kind of shut down specific drafts, like they've taken LRK or they've taken Ahmed, and you're confident that you think you can take turn one from them, or you can at least punish it. Like having Peyra plus Politis is very, very good at punishing a potential Ahmed draft. Racist Elf Lady. Yeah, still really fun character to play. Terrible character in the story. For this character, it's exactly what I said I was going to do last season. I decided to move her to Bastion of Hope in order to get that extra effect resistance. Honestly, I think I need a bit more ER than this. I think 174 really isn't enough. I think I need to go up closer to 200. But this is the best I can do for such a gear-demanding character, especially since I don't have imprints. Like, if I had more imprints, like if this was a triple S character, I could realistically play less defense for the most part. But this is how I chose to play her. Still a very important character. Near unbeatable in the 4-5 pick slot. There are a lot of times where your opponent has like Handguy, Apocalypse Ravi, and like, I don't know, maybe another single target DPS. It doesn't really matter too much, or maybe like it's Ilanav or something. There's literally no way in hell they can actually beat this character. So it's a force ban, and you can checkmate people really easily with her. Ahmed, mine's not particularly amazing. I promise you there are way better Ahmeds out there. I've seen like Apexes, for example, where it's like 300 plus speed with more ER and more bulk than mine, or at least similar bulk to mine. You know, Godspeed. Bless that man and his amazing rolls and his amazing gear. But for me, this is the best I could do. It's serviceable, usable. You will probably get speed contested a lot. I used her a ton for the first half to like 2/3 of my climb, and then more and more people started to get wise, and just the second they see Ahmed, they bring out the Rand, they bring out the Peyra, they bring out the effectiveness, because there's no way in hell they want to actually play against this nonsense. You need to have a game plan against Ahmed. My game plan was Politis. Once people started banning Politis with Ahmed, my game plan became just ban Ahmed. Just don't deal with this absolute monster of a unit. I think one of the pillars of the aggressive drafts in this format, and one of the characters that if you were serious about being successful and pushing in this format, I think this was the character you wanted to lean very, very heavily on. Alencia. Pretty much the same Alencia as last season. Not as good as she was in previous seasons. If you recall, in previous seasons, she was really good in the 3 slot to counter Apocalypse Ravi. And Apocalypse Ravi is definitely more played this season than she was last season. She was pretty much everywhere. One of the 3 most drafted characters in the game alongside Conqueror and Mediator Quer. With the advent of Ilanav and certain players realizing that Ilanav is a real option, you can't just take Alencia in the 3 slot, because now people will try to punish the draft by going super aggressive and just like killing her with like Architect Leica and like maybe something else. Like just go super aggressive, like pivot completely out of the standard strategy where Alencia is not exactly the best. Or they Uno reverse you and they just take Ilanav in response to your 3rd pick, Alencia. So Alencia now is kind of in the 4-5 pick slot. I really don't think you can pick her anywhere outside of the earlier or the later parts of the draft, because the earlier part, she's super punishable. Still insane when she's actually good. Like when you get her through the draft and there's not too many things that are going to be able to focus fire and burst her down, she will be that late game clutch character. She will get you that W. But again, it's not as safe as it was in the past. Rimuru Tempest. I was originally planning to go Destruction Penetration or Speed Penetration with Benimar's Tachi. But my Tachi, if you want to see, I have 3 that can only go to plus 15 because I was not blessed on this man's banner. I got 1, 2, and bought 1 with powder. So that means I only have a 75% chance to get immunity. And if you remember from the Tensura builds video, this character is primarily used to counter command model Leica. If you don't proc Tachi, that whole counter goes out the window. And after about 4 or 5 games lost to it, I said enough is enough, and I went back to my old Rimuru build, and I switched the artifact to Merciless Glutton because I recognized when I played STG in Kana's tournament that the only reason I won that match is because not only did I get Analyze and Assess, but I got Elbrus Ritual Sword from Ilanav, which meant that my Rimuru just didn't do enough damage. So I switched from Draco Plate to Merciless Glutton so that I could eke out that little bit of extra damage. And it definitely pays dividends. When you get the Analyze and Assess, you do actually end up getting the kill shot more often than not. My Rimuru probably could be a bit better than this, but he's serviceable, and I think he's really important because having access to him on immunity completely dumpsters the very popular command model Lyco plus Landy draft that has been used a lot in the higher parts of the ladder. Zahak, I'm pretty down on Zahak in general because I am not, again, a super fast player. I think Zahak is only good against Savior Auden when you know you have turn 1, you have it secured. He's only really good in this scenario for very aggressive drafts. With the advent of Last Piece Corinne coming next week and her way better speed stat, the fact that she'll be able to run potentially circles around Zahak, makes me want to have her be my very fast character that I use into dodge characters, because I could realistically go ahead of something like Conqueror Lilius and pose a very serious threat to the Auden in that scenario. I can't do that with Zahak. So I think going forward with Zahak, well, if I happen to pull, if I'm fortunate enough to get Last Piece Corinne, I think the way that I'll approach playing this character is on this exclusive equipment, the resource reduction, and repurposing him into a mid-speed bruiser, so that way I can take him into Lionheart Sirmia, because there are a lot of things that get pre-banned by Lionheart, and the people who are trying to play Lionheart are very tricky, so there's not a whole heck of a lot of good options. There's good ones, but they try to wall off the conventional ones most of the time. So going back to that counter pick Zahak versus Lionheart is where I think I'm going to approach him in the future. And again, I'll have my fast anti-dodge character to be Last Piece Corinne, hopefully. And then other than that, we can rely on good old Sanya and Ikarina. Speaking of old reliable, here is Green Armament. Still my favorite character to play into anti-cleave, or I should say as anti-cleave into things like Green Sid Cleave. Some of the really good Sids have enough damage to actually burst me, and that's because I'm on a 15 Elbrus, because my 31 is on Ilanav, because I use her more often, and my other 31 is on Bellion, because I use her more often. So yeah, I should have about 14.2k, I believe, on a plus 30 Elbrus, so if that's where you want to ballpark it, if you actually have a plus 30 RES. I think for anyone who is a new player or an intermediate player, I think you want Green Armament. I think Green Armament is a very good character for most people to have access to if you don't have speed gear and you are struggling against specific aggressive strategies. Yeah, it's RNG, and I know a lot of people are saying like, oh, why would you bank on that? I know that a lot of other content creators are not very big on this character, but she saves my bacon a lot. She wins me most of the games that I pick her in. She's either going to draw a ban and let something else that might be more pressing through, or again, you get that Elbrus and you clutch it out and it feels really good. Yeah, really like this character. She's definitely one of my favorite characters to play into Cleave. Here is or I should say my take on Big Smo's Sanya. If you remember from the Triumph season, I really wanted to play this. I thought it was such a cool build on Sanya, and mine, I think is decent. I know that obviously there are others out there that are Sanyas that are better, but this was the best that I could do, and I still have some swaps that'll give me like 70 over the 17k HP threshold, and I'll get a little bit more effect resistance. I'll get like 145, 146, right? But this is what I could use, and honestly, it was pretty good. I won a large majority of the games that I got this Sanya through the draft. I think the only times I was just really not firing on all cylinders with Sanya when I was taking her is when my buddy Crest was actually watching my games, and no matter what, Sanya always got crit. It was like actually impossible most of the time, and then I would just like randomly get stunned by like an ROL because she procced her effectiveness buff. So aside from that one night, which is terrible because he thinks that this version of Sanya is awful, and that's just like more evidence for him. He could throw it in evidence.zip that ER Sanya is a scam and not real. So aside from that, This one was pretty good. I had a blast playing this character all season. If you've been watching my stuff for a while, you know I think Sanya is an absolutely amazing character, and I love playing her. And it's incredibly satisfying whenever anyone just dies to Indomitable Spirit's reflect damage. Yulha, probably my favorite Arias character to draft in the season, because the character honestly is just a pretty cool character and honestly feels very satisfying when you use Symphony of Agony. Not the best tank, not the one that I had the most success with, but I felt it was important to have her geared. I switched off of counter set because it felt a little too passive and moved more towards revenge, because I feel like revenge is kind of the way you want to go with characters like her and Krau. So as they get low on health, they gain a huge chunk of speed, which allows you to get off the S3 here, Symphony of Agony, secure a kill. So that's why I moved onto this actual build. I draft her primarily into dodge units like Remnant Violet, into Savior Auden, and the big one that I always draft her into is Last Rider Crowd, because they're obviously going to try to press S3, and that is going to put Yulha at like 45 to 50% most of the time after that first S3 press, which is not enough to kill like Apocalypse Robbie or like a tank or something, but that is certainly enough to kill anything in like the 15k or less HP range. So like a lot of these dodge units, Lionheart, Sirmia, like Milam, for example, like all those characters just die. So it's kind of like, hey, do you want to press the button on Last Rider Crow? If you do, I'm absolutely taking a character from you. Like you will do like a third to half health for a lot of my characters, but I will absolutely just turn around and kill the next character, especially if I'm on revenge here. The ER is not mandatory on this, by the way. The Malicious Smile here, the Murderous Intent, does have a full cleanse. It's just when I was looking through my actual builds here, I could have 0 ER with the same defense and like 30.5k HP, or I could have 29.7 here with 92 ER, and I was like, I'll just take the ER. Like it might save me from a random provoke or something, something or somewhat. Yeah, fun character. Celine, another one of my favorite characters. I think that this character, there are very few games where I want to draft this character. I think this character is very difficult to use in the current format. There are a couple of drafts where I would pick her and I would just win outright because they didn't respect the Celine because of the fact that I have almost 1100 defense and pretty high HP for what this character actually is. But man, she doesn't do squat to Ahmed, and you really want non-attack skill punishers versus Ahmed, and this really just isn't it. This really isn't a good answer at all to Ahmed. So yeah, I played Celine maybe 3 or 4 games all season, which is rough because this is one of my favorite characters in the game. Again, very difficult to use, but when she works, she works. Green Vildred. This is the same one from the Asthmatic 13 video, and last season I really only use him for his speed imprint if I need to like force Para to have turn 1, for example. And then other than that, he's just for my Asthmatic 13 one-shot. Violet. I switched to this build on Violet after watching Eldmage a couple of days ago. He was talking about how everyone was on Ran and Para, which they were, and how he wanted Violet not only for your opponent being greedy and picking too many blue damage dealers, but he also wanted Violet in case your opponent went with too many blue openers. So that is why I decided to go with a faster Violet that has more damage at the expense of bulk. Landy. I'll be honest with you, Landy was insane last season. It's why I lost so much sleep over Milam. But Landy is really not all that, at least in my opinion, in the current meta. There are too many fast characters that shut her down. You have to be fully committed to being very fast and very aggressive. And there are a surprising amount of red characters in the format that are actually playable and good against Landy. And then there's obviously things like Alencia, if they stabilize, can knock her out of stealth. There's a lot of things. Last Rider Crow is a big one. Traditionally, you would expect Last Rider Crow to not be super great against Landy because his immunity and his barriers means we can just keep S3ing over and over and over again. But it just charges him so fast. And again, he's AoE and he has really good damage on the S3, which means he can very easily knock you out of stealth on this character. It's hard, I feel like, to use Landy really well. There are some people that I would see that would have amazing success with her. I was not one of those. I don't really like Landy too much in this format, at least not this build. But the thing is, the alternative is the slow, like 17k plus health one on Bloodstone that like Call used to play in the past. And that one doesn't feel super good either because the slow characters have insane damage in this format. So it's either you can't reliably play a fast character and protect it, and if you so the alternative is go slow, and then if you're going slow, the people who actually are slow and have characters that are damage built slow, they hit like an absolute truck. So yeah, Landy not as good, still playable. Not gonna sit here and tell you she's not playable. She can absolutely win a lot of drafts. Still very powerful, just very difficult to use from where we were just a whole season ago. Destina, I dropped, I believe, my effect resistance a little bit to get, I think it's a little more speed and a little more health. I changed things a little bit on this character. Just all reliable. If you need to play a long game and you need a cleanser, like a second cleanser versus AOL, sure, then you can absolutely take Destina. Don't think I have to say too much about this. If I'm going to say a lot more about Destina, I'll do it in a how to play in a deep dive fashion. Rowana gear does not matter on this character at all. She is simply there to look pretty, and for her S2 passive Vigilant Eye, you can play almost anything, just enough ER to make it uncomfortable for the Archdemon Shadow matchup if I ever run into her. That's the main reason also why we have Stella Harpa, so that way we can kind of deny that possibility where if they're going to give us Rowana, they might try to seal it. No, we're going to take that away from them. Pretty much just a force ban in the 4-5 slot. Like if they don't respect it, then you win. For example, if they have Solitary of the Snow, you could take Rowana and Lionheart Sermi, and it's like, cool. You either give me a guaranteed S3 on Lionheart, or you just give me infinite sustain off Rowana. And depending on what their draft is, the Lionheart might just be absolutely fatal to them. Hey, look, it's that really slow, bulky Conqueror Lilius that, you know, is completely different than how every other player plays Conqueror Lilius, I feel like. Hey, she's one of the most degenerate, broken characters ever made, and you should probably have her built if you own her, because taking her first pick gives you such a massive advantage throughout the rest of the game. Who would have thought? Yeah, here we are. What, 4th season in a row in Emperor with this same really slow, really crappy Conqueror Lilius. If I can make top 300 or so every single season with the 287 Conqueror Lilius, maybe you don't need a 300 plus speed Conqueror Lilius. Would it be nice? Sure. But you can build a 285 speed Conqueror Lilius in the meantime and start winning games. Think about that. Next up is Lionheart Sermia, my favorite character currently in the entire game. I dropped the speed by about 10 and the HP by about 400 or so in exchange for 40 effect resistance. That way, when I proc It's Far From Over, I will have a comfortable 120 effect resistance, which puts me out of range for things like potentially Handguy S2, potentially ROL S3, and that allows me to keep that defense buff up longer, which allows my S3 here, I Am the Victor, to do a lot of damage. Character is harder to use now than she was in previous seasons because of things like the advent of Dark Corvus in the last pick slot, and just in general, the drafts are very, very aggressive this season, so you really have to be confident in your ability to stabilize and keep Lionheart alive. She's very much like the next character we're going to talk about, Little Queen Charlotte. If you can't actually protect either of these lovely ladies consistently, they're going to feel like they have no game impact. So here is my LQC. She has base speed with a lot more bulk and damage than I normally have. I did not get around to reforging this helmet, sadly. But yeah, this is how I have her built. There are definitely better ones out there. For example, Big Smose is kind of insane. But yeah, it's just the threat of having this character versus something like your Apocalypse Robbies. Just really strong character versus Anti-Dark. We'll see what her damage multipliers are in a couple of weeks. Don't regret having this character built. Won a decent chunk of games that I drafted him, but she's really, really hard to draft. So when I say I won a decent chunk of games, I maybe played her like 12 in the whole season and won like 8 of them, right? So that's what I mean. I don't play her nearly as much because I do not feel comfortable in my ability to keep her safe so much as Lionheart Sermia, who is on Proof of Valor. My hope is that her buffs give her so much extra damage on the Will of Lemaire that I can actually afford to invest in more bulk and more speed on this actual character. Ambitious Tywin, one of my Flex Aureus users. Again, if you pay attention to this video, there are so many characters that are built on Aureus in this account review. So, Ambitious Tywin, last we talked about him, is somebody that I was thinking would be potentially pretty good because he could carry the game from the tank slot. Lo and behold, that's actually true. Flash can absolutely win games, and Ambitious Tywin essentially allows you to take an Aureus holder early while still having a win condition, keep up some kind of aggression, some kind of tempo loss. Like how we talked about with Shuna, an early flash that lands a bunch of stuns or a bunch of defense breaks can absolutely shift the tempo of the game back in your favor. A well-timed flash absolutely will win games, which is why I decided to actually invest in him and give him some pretty decent tank gear. Ignore the necklace. It's not reforged because it's absolutely terrible, but it's the only thing I had laying around that could work on him, despite the fact that everything else on him is, for the most part, pretty decent. Not the best, but pretty decent, right? So this character was a lot better at the start of my climb than he was at the end of my climb, and that's because one of the characters we'll be talking about very soon, Last Rider Kraut, is so strong right now. And because Mediator plus Last Rider Kraut is so prevalent on ladder in the last couple of days, it became very difficult to take Ambitious Tywin early because Dedicated Cleanser, two-turn immunity granters for the whole team, means this character is just an S1 bot most of the time, which is kind of rough. This character is probably the most boom bust of all of the 5-star knights, it feels like. When he's good, he wins you the game. When he's bad, you wish you could have any other Aureus holder. Definitely one of the strongest ones, but not exactly the best some of the time. Hey, look, it's Windex Lady. We really like this character. You know how I build her. We build her really thick, not as much damage. I like having my Bellion at 170 speed. I know a lot of counter Bellions nowadays are very, very slow, like base speed, like maybe like 130 speed or something, and are just going way more damage than mine. I really want the ability to cycle. I really like the impact that Apocalypse has at the end of a rotation. If she's the last one to go, I can use Apocalypse and kind of dictate the whole second round of how turns are going to be. And I like having my ability to come back around and then soul burn for Light of Destruction. I really don't like having Bellion too slow. When I was helping Byakko last night, I noticed that his Bellion was a lot slower than mine, and I kind of made him make some pretty bad plays, I feel like, as a result, because I was just under the assumption that his Bellion was somewhere in the speed range of mine, and I forgot that the common way most people build her is much slower than mine, or they build her on injury, for example. Yeah, this is, I think, pretty much the same as how Bellion was last season. Must-have meta unit. There are just so many scenarios, especially against like Spectre Tenebria, where you want to force this. I don't care if you have Last Rider Kraut plus Spectre Tenebria. I'm still taking the Bellion. I'll potentially ban the LRK afterwards. Maybe I'll even ban the Spectre. I want the threat of you not having souls on my team. Crimson Armament, this was actually built because of Inori as well as Hezmana over on Car's server. I see Car draft Carmen made a lot when I do watch his streams, and I didn't know if it was really that good, but from just a pure damage mitigation standpoint, Crimson Armament might actually be the best Aureus holder in the game, and this is basically how I decided to build her. After a couple minutes talking to this guy, like, you don't need much. Just throw it together and try it with Maid and see how it goes. And I was pretty impressed with the results. Crimson Armament is the character you take if all you care about is reducing the damage that you take. She is the least impactful knight, it feels like, most of the time, but she doesn't have the bad matchups that like Arwell potentially has. She doesn't lose head-to-head versus some other tanks like Yulha does. She doesn't get boxed out by 2-turn immunity like Ambitious Tywin does, right? This is a character where you can feel good. This is one of the only Aureus Sphere characters, I think, one of only two you can take in the 1 to 2 slot that feels good and feels like you're not going to get absolutely destroyed for taking it, which is why I value her really good. She feels very lackluster most of the time, but this S2 here, Security State, plus the damage share from Aureus, plus the actual S3 here, Shield of the Holy Spirit, just provides you so much mitigation And I think going forward, Crimson Armin is probably the other knight that most characters should have geared alongside Unbound Knight Arwell. So here's one of those other season MVPs alongside of Shuna. Last Rider Crow is ridiculous. I don't even think mine is particularly good. There are people who have way faster ones than mine, that have more effect resistance than mine, that have more HP than mine, that do, more defense than mine. Mine is what I had laying around. I couldn't get this character an immunity. I've always struggled to build Last Rider Crow. I might have to take some time and just hyper focus on making perfect pieces for him in order to get him where I really want him. That said, even the scuffed Last Rider Crow was very, very important. I probably also need to actually finish Mullah Gorang his S3 punishment, because this character is essentially a light version of Dark Corvus. This character is the other tank you can take in the 1-2 slot. Aureus is not the best option on this character, but is also the best option on this character. So let me explain. This character has no real innate synergy on Aureus, it feels like, but because you take a Aureus holder in the 1-2 slot, most of those Aureus holders have bad matchups that can be exploited, it feels like, by things like Desert Jewel Basar, for example, or everyone obviously can lose to Architect Leica, right? So there are certain risks that you get to take when you are taking those characters. So having Aureus is really important for anyone who's playing a standard or a slower strategy. If you just jam Aureus on Last Rider Crow, he can be your Aureus even though he's not a great Aureus holder. You at least still have some damage mitigation on the team if you need it. The thing that makes this character insane is that they provide immunity for 2 turns, they provide barriers against AoE strategies, and Mobile Weapon Siegfried is absolutely ridiculous in terms of what it gives to your team. It allows you to set up aggressive strategies, it allows you to set up cleave strategies, it gives you reach for stealth units, it gives you reach for Spectre. It does very respectable damage, it can just win the game by itself. So Last Rider Crow in the 1-2 pick slot with Aureus gives you damage mitigation, reach, a win condition, protection from specific things, as well as denies debuff. So he literally does it all. And on top of that, nobody will ever actually focus down your damage mitigation source. He will sit on the board forever because no one wants to give you a faster mobile weapon Siegfried by proccing code number 00. Character is actually insane in this format. If you own him, you owe it to yourself to build him because he is just multifaceted, insanely flexible. Again, he can be tank down, he can be standard, he can be aggro, he can be cleave. He can play it all, and it all depends on how you build him, what artifact he's on, and because of all of these factors, your opponent has no idea if you're on a 245, 250 speed cleave Last Rider Crow on Portrait of the Saviors, or you're on a 190, 200 speed Last Rider Crow that's on 31k HP holding Aureus. They have no idea what you're actually on. It's very important, I feel like, for everyone to have this character geared if you do own him. Unbound Knight Arwell. This is actually worse than the one from the Triumph season. If you want to see how I built Arwell then, please refer to that video. I think that is a better Arwell. I needed to move stuff around so that way I could have a Maid Chloe to pair with Crimson Armin in the last week, which is why her effect resistance is lower. If you recall in the past, I played about 195, which is where I really think you want to be with this character. I do not like 130 to 150 ER. I will take a loss in speed if I can actually get that, because having Escort stripped feels really terrible. In fact, in the last week when I played this character on 155 ER, I noticed my Escort was getting taken away far more often than it was in the past from characters like Conqueror Elias. At around the 200 ER range, most Conquerors were not touching my Arwell. I was getting to keep my mitigation. Still, probably one of the best, if not the best overall knight in the game in terms of mitigation. Pound per pound, obviously Crimson Armin is going to give you more damage reduction. Last Rider Crow is, and Arwell, not Arwell, I'm sorry, Ambitious Tywin, you'll have those give you more aggressive slants. But this is the comfort pick, right? This is the safe one. It makes impactful plays. It's good at resisting. It's good at mitigating damage. It's good at making, or should I say, protecting carries. It's just an overall safe Unbound Knight and Unbound Knight ROL. Brain is starting to turn to mush because I've been exhausted pretty much this entire week. Savior Auden is up next here. I decided to go with a destruction variation of the character because I wasn't killing and securing games on the speed variation as much as before. When you have the destruction one on pen, you can absolutely destroy Apocalypse Ravi and other specific characters in one hit, and it makes the gust slash counter as fat as possible. I think unless you have something really specific in mind with the speed set Auden, I don't think I would want to play that much anymore. After having now tried Destruction, I think it is, at least from my playstyle, a bit better on the character. One of the best DPS in the whole format, by the way, Auden. I think the best DPS are Spectre, Apocalypse Ravi, and Savior Auden. I think if you own those characters, those are the 3 damage dealers that should have your best gear. Spirit Eye Celine, still pretty scuffed. Really only play her for Guild Wars, and then sometimes against specific single target cleave strategies like Green Sid, for example. If your opponent is on one of those strategies, you could take Spirit Eye Celine in the last slot. You can steal the turn with Secret Art Storm Sword, and then just undo whatever they kill, because Sid obviously can't kill this character in the first slot in his very first turn. I think going forward with her buffs, she will be actually obviously a bit better, but still just as niche. She might see a lot more play because if Jacko Valentine is as good as me and my buddy Crest are thinking, if she's going to be as prevalent as a cleave option as I think we are thinking she is going to be, having Spirit Eye Celine versus those characters might be pretty good, especially because most of those openers will actually trigger the Secret Art Storm Sword, which will allow you potentially to get through and not have to deal with that Jacko cleave. So this is something to think about. Might not be great for that, but it's something to keep an eye on because it was good versus some other single target cleave options. Commander Pavel, super scuffed. Refer to my one from other videos. He is largely just an adventure farmer. I didn't draft him once pretty much this entire season. Faithless Litica, mine's pretty scuffed. It's just enough damage so that way it feels like her attacks don't actually, tickle you. They have some weight to them. They do like maybe 3k damage so that way she could potentially score a kill. She's just really important versus certain drafts, especially versus Mediator. If you don't think that your opponent is going to go fast, or if you play against somebody a lot, this is not going to apply to, I think, everybody. I don't play Faithless Litica too much earlier on in the ladder. It's only when I get towards the Emperor or like the Legend level players that I'll go for Faithless Litica. For example, there are certain people out there, like names escape me at this moment, but like Hayumi, for example, doesn't really ever play fast. So I know from playing that person a lot, I can be as aggressive as I want. So this Faithless Litica for those kinds of matchups is enough. Again, primarily just a reset hand guy. AOL, my super scuffed AOL with the 78 boots and the 285 unreforged pieces. She was pre-banned most of the season. I had to uncage her for the last 3 days versus Ahmed because there's so few counterplays to Ahmed, and I have played against AOL for like a year plus now when I don't have her pre-ban, and I'm pretty accustomed to how my opponent is going to draft when they have AOL. Sometimes I get got. There are definitely some players out there that have trapped me pretty bad this season. Not necessarily with AOL, but just in general, like Wind Demon, for example. Like absolutely, I ran into him I think twice this season, and I think he just absolutely cooked me with Angel of Light Angelica in one of the games, and then obviously wrecked me in the other one. That guy definitely is very, very smart in how he drafts. But yeah, Angel of Light Angelica, I just threw something on her because she doesn't need a whole heck of a lot to be functional. Just have high effectiveness and decent bulk so you don't just get blown apart, and then just press S3 at the opportune time. Take all the tempo back like how we talked with Shuna. Win game. Super annoying. People tilt all day, every day against this character. If you have her, you probably should have her built because if you're not going to pre-banner and your opponent's not going to pre-banner, somebody's probably taking her. Here's the third and final character that could potentially have been an MVP candidate. We talked about this in the custom Mystic Summons. If you don't have Zeo, you need to have Sage Ball. That's why I had him in the mandatory category, because if you're not a speed demon, you need reactive ways to steal the turn from your opponent, whether that's, Eternus on a Soul Weaver, Ikarina with her Rocket Punch passive, Zeo with his ability to take turn 1, Sage Ball and their ability to actually cut the turn with the S2 being off of cooldown. You need these things because Otherwise, you're just going to get run over every single match. And he was the most reliable one for me. You can ask Divine Shadow if you talk to him. He watched several of my games throughout the season where I looked like I was in a losing position and there was no way I could win. And I just controlled an entire team with Sage, Ball, and Cezanne, taking myself all the way to like Frenzy 7 or Frenzy 8 and slowly dismantling and killing one character at a time. Keep Apocalypse Ravi stunned. Keep their other DPS stunned. Slowly work on the tank because they don't have any damage. Okay, tank is down. All right, slowly work on the support. Okay, work on the other, and so on and so forth. And just kind of slowly grind people down. It looked like I had no win condition because all I would have would be like Desert Jewel Basar plus maybe like Hand Guy and Sage Ball, and like that's it. And that would be all I have left. No other real ways seemingly to win the game. And he would just lock down and secure those drafts for me. And honestly, people really don't respect him as much. If you have like Sage Ball and like maybe Icarina, they might give you Icarina because it's like, oh, he doesn't have any damage. He can't really carry from this position. Now, Sage Ball can absolutely carry if RNG is on your side. And again, I think it's a very mandatory character for anyone who actually has this character. One thing that keeps coming through my brain, by the way, is Big Smo plays incredibly slow and doesn't like playing Sage Ball and Cezanne. How, bro? How do you not play this character? I feel like this character is too dumb for turn 2 players. I feel like you have to play him. Solitaria of the Snow. It's similar-ish to some of the other Solitaria builds. I feel exactly the same about her as I did in previous seasons. She's just really obnoxious in the 4 or 5 pick slot, can just take over a game just like we talked about Sage Ball and Cezanne. With Fairy Tail for a Nightmare, it wraps up games in a hurry, but I still think Abyssal is a bit better, but I only have 2 crowns. It's weird. I've been flowing this. I think there's not really a right or wrong answer between Fairy Tail and Abyssal. This one here, Fairy Tail wraps games up faster and is less RNG reliant, but Abyssal, in my eyes, just feels better because, like, I guess I high roll all the time with the thing. So when I win really, really hard, and my opponent usually concedes a lot quicker than when I'm playing on Fairy Tail. So if I ever pull another Abyssal crown, I'll probably switch to Abyssal back on Solitaria. Sylvan Sage Vivian, exactly the same as we talked about in the last season. Why immunity is important so we don't get S3 stunned by faster Spectre Tenebrias is a safe pick in general versus Spectre Tenebria drafts when we need her. And she's just generally probably the most attractive looking character in the entire game. Desert Jewel Basar, despite his 47% win rate, I still think this man is incredible. And I think somebody that you should have built if you are serious about the game. He's just very flexible. He allows you to cut and play reactively like I talked about. Turn 2 players need him on Eternus in order to steal the turn and steal games from your opponent, much like how Designer Lilibet was used in the past. That's why we're playing him. Barrier inversion, super important. Cleansing, super important versus the control matchups. Has sustain, has stuns, is much better than his win rate actually suggests. Made Chloe with some of the gear pulled from my ROL. Yeah, I wanted to try the Crimson Armin Maid draft that Carr always uses. I tried it. It was actually fantastic. I think Carmen Maid is a very real opening that you can take, and not everyone can punish it. Some of the best players can absolutely destroy it. They know exactly how to blow it up. But a lot of people struggle. Like going Crimson Armin, Maid Chloe, maybe like Sage Ball and Cezanne or another control unit to kind of keep them honest if they're trying to go fast, plus like Lionheart Sermia, like you can hunker down with that kind of team and potentially win the game. It's really, really good. I do like that kind of like style a lot. It's fun for me to play that kind of game, and I know it's incredibly frustrating for my opponents to play the game with that. You can even have like solo DPS, Maid Chloe, Shuna, Crimson Armin, and it's like, man, it feels unkillable with the amount of tempo that I actually have on this character. Apocalypse Ravi, one of the 3 pillars of the game. I don't think I have to explain why this character is just broken. My build is exactly the same as last season. She kind of went away for a little bit last season, came back to life at the end of the season, and people realized this character is just stupid broken. And she's just been stupid broken the whole season. She's pretty much always first pick, first ban. Like if your opponent takes Conqueror, you're probably taking Apocalypse Ravi Meteor. If your opponent takes Meteor, you're taking Conqueror Apocalypse Ravi. If your opponent takes Apocalypse Ravi, you're taking Conqueror Meteor. That's the 3 pieces of Exodia. for this format, as Valky calls it. You always want to take the pieces of Exodia. They really just are that important. They are that broken, and honestly, they probably should be adjusted at some point. Take another swig of water because I'm exhausted and I'm clearly losing my voice at this point. So, Dark Corvus is next. Solid anchor pick like we talked about in the last video. Builds a little bit different. Honestly, over 1500 defense, over 30k HP, any speed, it doesn't even matter. You got base speed, it doesn't matter. Over like 110, 120 ER if you can get it. Slap him on Durandal, you are good to go, baby. That's all you need. You're only picking him into low damage or teams that are forced to give you this character. For example, if they're playing only Lionheart Semi and no other real damage dealers, they can't kill Dark Corvus. If they're playing Solitaria and like Bellion and it's not an injury Bellion, you're confident about that, or some other forced AoE character, like if they somehow have like Solitaria Red Charlotte, right? They are forced to give you Dark Corvus. He will run away with the game and win the game by himself, even at base speed. That's where you're picking him. That's where he's strongest. Here is a different take on Designer Lilibet. This is a faster Designer Lilibet in much in the same vein as the Fast Politis that we talked about. This is specifically for certain aggressive strategies to give me the turn 2 Dilibet proc. I don't care about the damage, I just want the cleanse. So if you use For Honor on something like Conqueror Lilius, or you S3 me with Ran, or you S2 me with Pear, right? I want the cleanse. I want to actually take the turn. Like those are things that I'm looking for. Give me those things, and that's why I decided to drop a lot of my damage in favor of a lot more speed, because there more often than not I would just fail to cut and I would lose. And honestly, this is probably still not fast enough. I just don't have good enough gear to build Designer Lilibet any faster than this while still maintaining relevant defense stats as well as 100% critical hit chance when paired in tandem with Azure Comet. I could obviously switch the artifact to something even better. For example, like I know that Music Box is pretty good on this character now because it gives 10% defense attached to it, but I just can't get the critical hit chance while still maintaining the speed. Inferno Kawazu, I believe he's the same as the last video. Didn't draft him once all season. Is largely a Guild Ward unit. Lone Crescent Bologna, largely a Guild Wars unit, but there were a couple of games that I took her when my opponent had a lot of AoE comps, and I already had Last Rider Crow. I super do not want to play this character in a Last Rider Crow. A lot of people tried it. They ended up getting destroyed for it. A lot of characters, or I should say players, picked the character Savior Auden as well, which makes it hard to actually play this character. Look at my stats and you can see my damage is not really that impressive. My speed is not that impressive. Similar logic to Illinev. I just need to be tanky enough. I need to hold on, and I will let Sigurd Scythe stabilize the game for me, which is why my Bologna doesn't really do too much damage. She's just there for the long game. Here's our hand guy here. Not the best hand guy I've ever played. I've definitely played better ones in the past. I've played faster ones. I've played tankier ones. I've played counter ones. This is just the one that we decided to use this season because gear is at a premium, and I'm sure you've noticed now, my characters don't have the highest gear scores, but I have a lot of them geared. You could probably tell based on the runtime of the video. I want to have as many tools as possible so that it is incredibly difficult for you to play around me. And one of the biggest burdens with a box this big is learning all the different intricacies and when to take certain characters. Even it's dizzying for me. I think if I had more reps again, I would be more familiar and more comfortable with the size and depth of my box and be able to pick appropriately. Like we talked about Conqueror and Apoc Ravi, one of the 3 pillars of the format, you're going to take him in the first, second, or third pick total of the whole draft, no matter what, because even if they have Faithless Litica or some kind of counter, it's far better to have Mediator and face Faithless Litica than to be staring down a full debuff team of like AOL, Pirate Captain Flan, Death Dealer Ray, Solitary the Snow, so on and so forth. He just stops a bunch of nonsense in this game. Arbiter Vildred, only drafted him once or twice. He's only as a checkmate scenario versus Cleave. That's kind of it. Nothing special about my build whatsoever. As slow as we could get him, as much damage as we could afford with whatever leftover gear we had. As you can see, I'm on a 78 ring, so it's nothing too crazy. If he gets an S3 and wins me the game, sure, it was worth it. Which is, he lost the one game I picked him and he won the other one. I built this one actually because when I was on stream, a lot of people were pointing out, hey, this could have been potentially an RB game. So I just threw together an RB. BBK, aside from Green Armand, this is my favorite anti-cleave character. 210 ER might not be enough. I wish I could have more. I wish I had a second Bastion of Hope. Please, Smilegate, give us another symbol and another Bastion. It is super important, especially considering how Garbo effect resistance is in this game compared to effectiveness. So yeah, please give me that. Yeah, I worked really hard on this BBK, and as you can tell, I'm really exhausted. I'm on fumes at this point. Yeah, I think she's good as a counter cleave character. I know she could be better. I'm looking forward to last piece, Karen. Remnant Violet. It's just a standard Remnant Violet with what I had actually laying around. I think it averages like 71 gear score a piece or something. There's definitely people with better Remnant Violets. I only really draft him alongside Conqueror Liz because I never want to play this character into Conqueror Liz because of the fear of getting stripped and controlled super easily. That's pretty much only times I'm picking him, and when I know I need something that can counter like maybe Bellion, Lionheart, Sirmia drafts, things like that. That's pretty much where I'm taking a Remnant Violet. Briarwitch, one of the more important damage dealers in the entire game. Just who knew? Full strip plus the fact that she full defense breaks an entire team, plus is an anti-dodge character, plus denies revives, plus is incredibly difficult to punish early on in the game because she's in stealth, would be good. Yeah, if you have her, you're playing her. She's exactly the same as the last video, tuned in such a way that a lot of my damage dealers are going to follow up right behind her, especially like Last Rider Crow. If you Soul Burn, Briarwitch Assyria, and full strip and defense break somebody, that S3 from Last Rider Crow is killing most squishies and probably taking even the tankiest characters down to like 20 or 30% of their health. And from there, picking up the game should be a cinch. Operator Cigarette, we rebuilt this character because my Karina drafts were actually getting blown up a lot by Operator Cigarette. And also, Fallen Cecilia was starting to make a small resurgence in the format, which is why I decided to go with OpSig. Stats are lower than you're probably used to seeing from How to Play Operator Cigarette, but we're offsetting that with Torrent set. I think Torrent is pretty much the way to go on this character because we don't really care about her bull. Didn't draft her too much, but she was important to draft for certain things versus Arwell versus those random Fallen Cecilia drafts that I was running into from time to time. Pirate Captain Flan, this was a new acquisition within the last like 2 to 3 weeks. Finally got her up and running, or at least as close as I could to up and running. This character's broken into standard. I won so many games with her. I didn't really know where to go, and then I remembered when we were doing the Orbis Caster Clash that Valky was asked to film a 60-second review for this character and pack it full of as much information as possible. And it just so happened to get published on YouTube like a day or two after I got this. So I was like, sure, you know what? Slam it. Let's just play how Uncle Valky would play it and see how it worked out. Gotta say, mate, pretty good. Hosho Marin, ahoy. Super good, super fun character. I understand why he likes this character. Again, feels really broken into slow drafts, especially if they don't have a cleanser. Archdemon Shadow is probably the last character, aside from maybe the next one we talk about, that might be surprising to you that I actually had built. You'll notice that my attack is a bit higher for the burns on this character, and my bulk is still in that 15 to 17 range that we always talk about, and my speed is kind of whatever for a counter set. But there's no crit hit chance anymore, and there's obviously hasn't been effectiveness for a while for the seal. I just decided to go ER so that way I couldn't get stripped or stunned from the actual Spectre. Like a lot of Spectres, when I would draft this character, would just slam S3 and stun this character, or I'd get stunned or stripped from something in the game, and it would just be really, really frustrating. And I could have went immunity, but I decided, you know what? Crit chance really isn't even that insane on the character. The biggest thing, the biggest indicator of the damage comes from this here, Fairy Tale for a Nightmare, and from the burn damage on Dissolution. So I decided, you know what? Screw it. Let's just go ER, throw people for a loop. And I got a lot of people. Like, I got Sanyas and stuff that were like, oh, I'll just provoke the Archdemon. And I was like, nope, doesn't work. And then I'd Soulburn and seal the Sanya. And it's just like, oh, okay. So, like, now my other damage dealers can just ram into you and not have to worry about the anti-crit. I don't have to play the 50-50 game. I can just slam my Apocalypse like S3 into you and kill you. Champion Zerato is another hot gotcha character, very much like the Fast Politis and some of the other stuff that is in my box. A lot of people who are trying to play Death Dealer Ray or these other control strategies, they're like, I'm going to pre-ban, like I have maybe Destina Hand Guy and Edward, and they're like, I'm going to ban Edward or whatever. I know the Edward's coming, and then I go Edward plus Z Zerato, and it's like, oh, he's got 2 reflectors. Oh, I can't actually deal with that. That's pretty much the only time I play Champion Zerato. Only in those scenarios where my opponent is just trying to take like 4 or 5 control units and they are expecting Edward and they're gonna ban the Edward, and then you show up with CZ and it's like, oh, he's got essentially 2 Edwards for the purposes of this draft. That's kind of rough. Again, no other real reason to play him. He's really bad into Savior Odin. He's really bad into Apocalypse Ravi. Only really for those drafts. Here's my Spectre. Same as last season. Broken character, have to have her. Hopefully, if you're new and you haven't taken your Moonlight Blessing, take this character. She's stupid broken. She's like the best PvE DPS of all time. She's the best PvP DPS of all time. She's stupid. Honestly, they really need to give us a way to deal with this character meaningfully, because a lot of the cheese on ladder is built around the fact that you can't reliably answer this stupidly broken unit. And then finally is Zeo to round out the video. It's the same as last season. Honestly, I think the effectiveness build is more favored because of Ahmed for the reasons we talked about earlier in the video. So yeah, that's the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. As you can tell, losing my voice, absolutely exhausted from all of the work, all of the grinding, the fact that this will be the 4th video I put out this week. I'm going to go and enjoy the rest of my weekend now. Please do stay tuned for some of the other stuff that we're going to be putting out in a week or two's time. I will finally get around to making that Katie's 13 video, so please expect that. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye now.